Всем привет. Ставьте плюсики в комментариях, что нас слышно, видно, что мы с вами. С пятницы вас. Сегодня пятница перед праздником, поэтому у нас маленькая камера.
Поэтому Игорь сегодня будет пить в прямом эфире. Мы подготовили большой снаряд. Конечно, у нас для вас есть более интересное.
В смысле, Игорь, пить? А ты чего?
Я тоже, но я попозже.
Вот, собственно, так, да, там сколько у нас? 30 человек в онлайне.
Давайте если будет 100 человек, мы с Игорем напьемся прямо здесь. Я не знаю, как вас стимулирует, но мне кажется, с каждого раза будет. Это, кстати, уныние, потому что, я просил, если реально интересные серии, интересный контент, вы обязательно пишите об этом, голосуйте за это. Потому что мы для вас, в принципе, практически готовы съездить, записать 4-ю серию, да, но при этом возникает вопрос, где вы все?
Кстати, у нас 4-я серия уже поехала записываться, да?
Ну что ты людям рассказываешь? Я уже думал, не показывать им вообще больше ничего, что же они так уже отставляют от тебя твой пустой бокал.
Окей, собственно, так. Я думаю, вы уже в курсе, что у нас сегодня дизайн-студии мира. Это новый формат, где ребята поехали в Штаты, не поленились, и Сережа, собственно, записывал кучу видео из разных компаний. И сегодня у нас компания Tumblr, Tumblr точнее, да, почему Tumblr называю, интересно. И сегодня у нас Давина, может, скажешь пару слов про нее?
Давиной Ким, продуктовый дизайнер в Tumblr, мы были непосредственно там у них в главном офисе. Давина в этом отношении, в отличие от предыдущих серий, да, у нас были две продакшн-компании, это непосредственно был Епам, был Фэнтези. В этот раз мы копнули чуть глубже и пошли в продуктовую компанию, и мы решили расспросить еще раз о тех вещах, о которых мы обычно спрашиваем, но под призмой того, как это происходит реально в цифровом продукте. И вы сейчас посмотрите эту серию и наверняка сделаете для себя определенные выводы, что продуктовая компания в целом все очень похоже, но немножко не так. Это, собственно, то, о чем я вам хотел чуть-чуть рассказать.
Ну что, погнали. Собственно, доставайте, не знаю, если вы сидите где-то в офисе, то берите коллег, показывайте, как работают в Штатах. Если вы сидите дома, то берите вино, пиво или чаек или что-нибудь еще. Мы тут тоже сядемся с вином, и тоже сами с вами посмотрим всю эту, собственно, серию. Только мне тихо слышно, надеюсь, что только вам. Если вдруг тихо слышно, скажите, сделаем видео погромче. Ну что, погнали.
Мы просыпаемся, парни, мы сидим в классическом американском, как это называется, дайнер?
Дайнер. Приходите сюда в рабочий день, здесь с утра останавливаются машинки, они приходят сюда кушать яйца, сосиски и дальше идут на работу.
Это оригинальное место, видите, оно оббито деревянной вагонкой, это вообще вагончик, который стоит на улице, причем в самом центре Нью-Йорка. Вчера уже были, по сути, последние встречи, сейчас последний свободный день. Твое общее мнение вообще, как эти парни здесь?
Они открыты, они думают и работают так же, как работаем мы, думают и сталкиваются с теми проблемами, с которыми сталкиваемся мы. То есть они не инопланетяне. Все то же самое. На клиенты говорят, подвиньте кнопку влево, подвиньте вправо. Это EFI. А им говорят кнопку влево и более красненькую.
Наши интерфейсы действительно такие легкие, простые, и мы недостаток этих деталек заворачиваем в анимошечки, то здесь у ребят реально на полном серьезе. Я вчера, к сожалению, запретили снимать изображения с мониторов, но я вчера на полном серьезе смотрел на то, что у них происходит на экранах. Это такие классические awards сайт, то есть с какими-то невероятными типографическими решениями, с обложками, то, что у нас в Офисе, в принципе, уже не производится. Это очень крайне редкий пример, потому что у нас в основном личные кабинеты, всякие банкинги, кнопочки, таблички, сервисы, приложушки и так далее. Они до сих пор занимаются разработкой таких классических интернет-сайтов, корпоративных сайтов. Несмотря на все это, везде все, в среднем одинаково.
Around while we're eating. Again, excuse the mess, it's food. But you guys are welcome to any drinks or snacks if you want.
Thank you.
But yeah, normally this is a lot cleaner. And we usually have cold brew coffee on tap and some kind of beer usually. Our our office manager is really good about sending out an email every week saying like what's on tap. And then like a food.
And of course football, very popular in our team. Николай Иванов сейчас наверняка просто восхищается этим желтым замечательным кикером.
We also hold like events in this space. Sometimes like happy hours. We also do a lot of like activations with partners where we'll do like movie screenings or we'll let other people kind of like host something in our space that we think that has like kind of like an overlap to the Tumblr community.
Have you been in this office for long?
Yeah, almost since the start. I think they got in here in 2009 and started as like one half of a floor, and now they've expanded to be like
now we have
5 or
like
6 floors.
Yeah. So this is the front floor. It's a creative team. They usually sit. We also share the floor with the sales team. They're here every Friday and Wednesday. Kind of like the same layout where we have like a kitchenette. This is usually where the creative team sits. And this is actually one of the product designers, my colleague Ed.
Hi.
He's like,
Setting up reminder.
this is Eric. He's a designer on the
Hi.
art team, and he's working on some stuff. Yeah, and like this is where all the product designers sit. This is where usually the copy team sits, and then the art team, and they're responsible for any of like Tumblr art, branding, and all that stuff. So anything outside of product design.
What makes a product design, like an ideal, perfect design? What do you think a product designer needs to?
Like the ideal skill sets a product designer should have. I think there's a lot of skills that a product
Yes, of
designer.
course.
So I think as a product designer, there's 3 areas in design that you should be able to kind of be well versed in, and it's user experience design, interaction design, and visual design. Because if you take all 3 of those and put them together, that's what product design is ultimately. And I think what the other aspect of product design is knowing things to a technical nature, being able, you don't have to code by no means, like designers shouldn't have to sit there
So
and code things.
it is because it's also we have a deal about that the future of product designer is that kind of specialist that need to code really.
No, I think you can code if you want. It's really up to the individual. If they have interest in learning to code, by all means go ahead code. But I think what differentiates a product designer from just maybe a regular like brand designer or anything like that is that a product designer has a full understanding of user experience, interaction, and visual design, and as well as being able to think through any of like the technical roadblocks. So maybe having a working knowledge of whether it's Swift, Objective-C, or JavaScript, just so that when you're solving a problem, you know that this is something that an engineer can create. Because if you're creating something like from your head and you're like, oh, I have a solution, and you bring it to the engineering team and they look at it, they're like, we can't do that because that technology doesn't exist, then you have to go back and restart. So you have to have that kind of acumen. And also, I think what makes a really great product designer is having the ability to have product thinking, and that's understanding the strategy of a product. So, oftentimes there's even now, if you look at the App Store, there's so many apps, and then there could be like 5 apps that are very, very unique, and then from those 5 apps, there could be at least like thousands of clone apps. And I think what you need to have a strong understanding of as a product designer is solving a problem and then also validating that with product thinking. Like, what kind of problem are you fundamentally solving? Because if it's just, to me as a product designer, I want to solve problems that are going to improve people's lives, not just something that's fun. It's just, if you're not solving a fundamental problem, then to me, I don't think you should invest that much time in it. If it's something like, oh, it's just an app just to send somebody a sticker, like, it's not really solving a problem, it's not making the world a better place. You're just like, it's another way of communicating. But I think if you realize there's a problem and you find a solve for it. Like, I don't know, like let's say you go to a restaurant and you get the check and the waiter says, I can't split the check, right? Then you have to sit there and you have to mentally calculate, like, okay, I got this and then whatever. But if you have an app that could help you calculate that very easily, and then maybe be able to send your friend money without carrying cash, like you're solving a real problem, a real-time problem, real-world problem. So that's like what product design is, versus like I created an app, you have the same app, and the only thing I can do is send you a sticker. I think, just to reiterate, because I know I was like gabbing, but product designers should have good understanding of user experience, interaction, visual design, and then as well as, have an interest to want to learn and continue to learn, whether it's coding, whether it's business or product thinking, product strategy. I think that's the difference between like, a good product designer and like an okay product designer is like having that curiosity and wanting to learn and grow as much as you can. Like it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have. I think for me, I look up to product designers that are continuously growing and learning new things and then sharing that knowledge with other people.
We talk much with different designers, yes? And you said there is really three important things: UX, interaction design, and visual design. We also know such words like UX, UI, yes? And what is the difference between UX, UI and UX, interaction design, and visual design? Because it is different words, but I think everybody will be interested in this little difference. Can you tell much more about it?
Yeah. So when I mentor younger designers, the way I like to break it down is, so for product design, there's UX, interaction, and visual design. So when you think about it, you have to kind of think of it in terms of like architecture. When you're creating a building, you need a blueprint, right? You need a blueprint of the floor plan of the building that you're creating. To me, that's UX design. That's the user experience. That's the foundation, the structure of the design of whether it's an app or a website, whatever you're designing. Interaction design is how a door opens. Does it open inward? Does it open outward? Does it slide? That's interaction design.
So it is about interaction like animation, motion.
Like how you're interacting with it. Yeah, how a person is interacting
Mm-hmm.
with that piece of UI. Visual design.
Piece of UI, it is very important, yes.
Visual design, if you look at it in terms of architecture, is the color of the wall. What kind of wood are you using on the floor? It's stuff like that. So like in a package, when I communicate what product design is and I break it down in that metaphor, people are like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. So you're building something. You're building something realistic, but you need all of these layers, all of these foundations to kind of encompass product design, and that's what it is. Like user experience is somehow like how would somebody kind of maneuver their way in an app? Like how do they go from one screen to the next screen? And the interaction design is like the transitions. Like okay, they're going from screen A to screen B, but how are they doing that? Is it like fading in? Is it sliding in? Is it is it sliding from below or whatever? And then visual design is like what color is this button? Is it a button that they tap to get to the next screen? Or is it like a touch gesture or long press or something like that? So that's what it is.
What about data? What about do you think it is important for product designer to use analytics and data?
Yeah, definitely. I do. I think because that's all going to help you in identifying the problem. In what I do every time I work on a new project, I always try to gather quantitative data and qualitative data. And the difference is quantitative is numbers, right? So you're getting maybe like how many times does a person upload a photo? That's quantitative. Qualitative is asking that person, how do you feel when you upload that photo? Is it easy? Is it hard? Does it make you frustrated? Like you're just trying to get a better understanding. So to me, you always need both. because you can always have analytics tell you the numbers of engagement, whether it's increasing or decreasing, but without talking to someone, a user, you're not necessarily going to understand if there is a problem with a piece of UI or UX. You're only kind of making assumptions, and if you're making assumptions, you're only thinking about how you would use a product. So you don't want to do that. Like for me, I tell like my friends and other designers, don't ever design for yourself. Place yourself in the other person's shoe. Think about maybe if your grandmother who doesn't really use technology that much, how would she use the app? And if she's struggling with using the app, how would you make it easier for her to understand and use the app? So that's kind of the mentality that you have to put.
How do you come up with new features on Tumblr? How do users help you here?
How they validate and help us is when we build these prototypes and we work with the UX researcher, and she recruits like all of these users, whether they're existing Tumblr users or people who have never used Tumblr before, and we placed like a prototype in front of them, and we actually try to we're just observing their behavior, how they're interacting and engaging with this prototype. Are they, one example is maybe you have, I don't know, like 2 screens and there's no button anywhere. However, there is a way for you to go from screen A to screen B, but how would you do it? And that's something that's what we're observing. Like if we place that in front of a user, are they going to try to tap on the screen to go to the next screen? Are they going to try to swipe? What are they doing? Like that's what we're observing. And I think that's very important, and it helps us understand how we can make things easier for the users without having them relearn a new behavior and become frustrated and get angry and just not use the app, because that happens a lot. But that's ultimately what we look for, and that's what we ask from our users. And believe it or not, our users are really great. They're very passionate, so they'll let us know one way or another if they like it or not. And it also helps, like looking at the analytics, if something is decreasing, then that triggers for us to kind of look into it deeper and investigate more, like what's going on here, like what can we fix, like maybe it's a little harder to understand, so how can we make it easier.
Also interested, what do you think about trends in product design maybe? What will be important in next few years?
Because I have my own personal opinions, and that's what I'm going to go with. I think VR is still far from being the next best thing, like the next hottest thing, because if you think about it, if you're thinking about the experience of VR, you're sitting there in a room inside wearing a headset that covers your face, and you're sitting there and you're reacting to what you see. But if somebody else, if your friend is sitting next to you and they don't have the same, headset with you, you look like an idiot next to you. You're like reacting, and your friend is just like, I don't know what you're looking at because I don't see it. So I think VR is still a little bit far. I think if they could kind of take that technology and then maybe reduce it to whether it's like glasses or sunglasses, something very lightweight and easy for somebody to use without looking foolish. I think that would be it. That would be cool. I think AR is a little bit closer in terms of being a trendy thing, because AR, you could just use a screen, whether it's a monitor or your phone screen. Everybody has a phone these days, so I think that's something that could kind of potentially take off, but it's still, again, it's very niche and it's a very small interest, because if you like Pokemon Go is a good example of AR. For a while it was very trendy, everybody was on it, they needed to catch all the Pokemon, but then after a while they got tired of it because they're like, I don't want to look at my screen anymore. So it's like touch and go.
What do you think about this trend? Do you know such trend as zero UI?
I think zero UI is actually something very interesting in terms of like, now you have Google Home and Amazon Echo, and using voice commands, that's all zero UI. And even I guess when you look at your phone, and sometimes when there's no like UI buttons or anything, and it's all based on like Snapchat. Let's say this big circle on Snapchat didn't exist, but you just automatically knew that to take a video you just tap and you hold and it takes a video, that's zero UI. I think in that terms we're getting there a little bit faster because the younger generation, they tend to pick up things like zero UI very easily and very fast. And I think it all kind of trickles down. It starts from the younger generation, and then before you know it, the older generations kind of follow after that because it becomes a familiar pattern. They're seeing it more and more. And I think that's more trendier. I definitely think that voice command is going to be a huge thing, and it's, if anything, going to improve. And I could see voice command coming into play maybe in car UI when you're driving, like in a Tesla or just a smart car. Because right now, my personal opinion, when you're driving, like whether it's a Tesla or you have a smart car that's hooked up to Google Car or whatever, or Apple Car or whatever, you're still dependent on looking on a screen when you're driving. And that to me is dangerous. You're taking your eyes off the road and you're engaging with this large piece of screen and you're still touching things. Meanwhile, you're driving and anything could happen. So I think that a lot of the companies like Apple, Google, Tesla, they're probably going to use voice command a lot in terms of like helping users navigate their systems in the car.
Back to product design. You said about UX, interaction, and visual. And in your team, these people, it is one role or it is different people who do this work. So prototyping and visual, it is one person or maybe 2 person, 3 person.
I think the great thing about Tumblr is, just reiterating, we have over 300 million Tumblrs. That's a very large user base. And if you look at other companies like Facebook, Instagram, Google, Apple, they have teams, design teams of hundreds of people, hundreds of designers. But when you look at Tumblr, it's only 4 of us. It's myself, Anna, Ed, and Lydia, our product design lead. And we're designing everything.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, and between the 4 of us, we do all of it. We do the UX, interaction, like prototyping, visual design, working with the UX researcher. It's just us. So, like, I think that's very something that's unheard of outside of Tumblr, because I'm not really sure with Instagram, but their design team is larger than ours. But yeah, like, even me, when I first found that, I was shocked. And then when I tell other people, they're like, really, there's just 4 of you? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, wow. It's a large product. And they ask the same questions, like, what do you do? And I'm like, we do all of it. UX, all the way to visual design to shipping. Like, we work with the engineers. Like, it's just one designer, and we're normally on a few different product teams. So it could get a little chaotic, but we're pretty good in terms of like maybe staggering projects so that we have enough time to fully work through everything that we need to.
How do you grow, and where do you what's your career kind of path look like? Or where do you want to be taking it, and how in this area?
Like personally, for me, I'm always looking to expand my knowledge. So I read up a lot on like things that don't have to do with product design at all. Like I read up a lot about psychology, because to me, when you're working on a product, you're kind of trying to convey how somebody's gonna understand this piece of UI or UX that you're working on. So it's like better understanding like how other humans think. And then also just like kind of like taking on like reading up on like technology, because technology is changing so fast, and to be an effective designer you have to know what Apple's gonna come up with, what Google's gonna do, and just following on that. And it's just, I think to me as a designer or any profession, whether you're an engineer or anything, is you always come to a point in your career where there's a fork. And it's either you become an expert in your practice, like for me, product designer. I'm either going to be one day a principal product designer, where all I do is they come to me because I know everything about product design. Or the other fork is, do I want to become a manager? Maybe I don't want to design as much, and maybe instead I'm taking interest in helping other designers grow and mentor them, and kind of help them build their career. So there's like 2 paths of that. And I think for me, I think about it, I like to go back and forth. And I think some companies, I know on Tumblr, and Yahoo, they allow that, where you could do, either you could maybe for a little time be a manager, and then you can go back to practicing your skill set. And I think that's like very valid to have if you want to have that entrepreneur type of spirit. And I think it's just, again, just like following up, not copying the trends, but following the trends, keeping an eye on them, and kind of using them as a guidance to see like if there's things that you can pick up from, but also just like being curious and learning things like in terms of like technology, what's happening with, in terms of like human behavior, because right now there's like there's a buzzword for human-centered design, which is when you're designing UI or UX, in the epicenter of that is a human being. So you have to make sure that your design translates and it feels human and it doesn't feel robotic. So that's why I kind of try to read up on psychology. And
what are your sources for learning about the trends and the technology, and like what do you read up? Where do you find it?
The one thing that I follow, that I'm on, like that I read, is on Twitter. And with Twitter, the great thing about Twitter is you can follow like different designers, you can follow different companies, and all that stuff. And people are really great about sharing links, throwing their ideas and all that stuff. And then you could kind of create that. Or there's also Dribble. Dribble is a good community to kind of go there and see what some of the designers are working on, and kind of if you like something, kind of try to learn how they did that. There's also Behance, which is better because designers are now, I think now what's getting popular is they're building case studies and kind of going deeper into a project instead of just like, oh, this is the finished project, but they're talking about their process. And I think when you read more about people's process, you're going to have a better understanding of what you should do in your process, because everybody works differently, but at the same time it's all similar. So you can see how somebody gathers research, you can see how somebody does sketching, and just pick up on that, and just try to do different things, because there is no right or wrong way in a process, as long as you feel validated that you solve the problem that you're trying to solve and you meet the goals that you're trying to meet. So yeah, I mean, I think Twitter is a great source, Medium is a great source. There's other thing that I'm on, Designer News is a great source. It's kind of like Reddit, but just for designers. It's really interesting. I could share you the link, I'll email you the link, but you just sign up for an account, and it's just, the community is very large. It's just designers like sharing links and asking questions and all that stuff. And I think there are instances where other product designers or designers, they kind of do like Ask Me Anything. So, designers can ask each other questions and stuff. It's a thriving community.
Also, we have a very popular question. It is about software that you use every day. Everybody needs to know Photoshop or Sketch.
Sketch all the way.
All the way?
Yeah.
Oh.
Goodbye Photoshop. I stopped using Photoshop 3 or 4 years ago.
And what do you think about Adobe Experience Design?
I've actually never tried it because within the product design team, we use a multitude of product design tools, like prototyping tools. So, but because we don't use Adobe at all on a daily basis, that we just never tried it. So I have no idea. I mean, I've seen videos about what it can do, but I've never tried it, so I have no idea how it is.
Okay, and maybe you use something else that optimize your work.
I guess like the tools that I use a lot on a daily basis here is Sketch. Tumblr, we use Slack to communicate with each other, so that's really great. The other thing that we do is when we want to create maybe very short UX flows, just connecting screens together, we use InVision, which is really good. And then also InVision is great because you can send the link to somebody else and then they can give you feedback and comments. So that's good. And then the other thing, like prototyping, like if you want to prototype at a higher fidelity, we've been using Flinto, Framer.js, Principle. So those are usually the prototyping tools that we use. We don't have within the team, like we don't have, nobody has like a set thing. It's basically like you use whatever you're comfortable with, and whatever works best for your workflow.
In terms of screens, by the way, for example, working in the media, which is or like with media companies, you see that the audiences are very distinctly moving to more mobile screens. So for some, what I mean in general is that for some types of product, you have the whole experience kind of transitioning from the web where it used to be to the mobile screen. At the same time, like people are at work every day at their laptops or desktops, which means that if they need to distract, that this is what they're gonna do. So have you been following some different? Have you observed different types of behavior that you can identify in like different types of screen, or a trend of like having to prioritize mobile screens much more, or what is going to be the role of the desktop screen like going forward?
I mean, this is something that we are trying to figure out ourselves, but across the table, I think there's a good understanding that whenever for desktop, it's more of an investment in time because you're sitting there. And so that investment in time is like you're putting the work in it, like whether you're creating something or uploading something or whatever. For mobile, it's more fast paced because you're on the go. You could be looking at your mobile while you're walking, waiting for the train or waiting for your friend or anything like that. So I feel like a lot of the successful apps or products, like they usually have both web and mobile. And I think usually the successful ones make the playing field even on both, because you don't want people to see that disconnect where you're like, oh, I could do something on my phone, but I can't do it on my on my web. Why could I do something on my web, but I can't do it on my phone? And then that gets people frustrated. So I think it's more of like keeping that experience consistent, whether you're turning your website into a responsive site where it could shrink down to mobile, or if you have an app and a website, just making sure that when you ship a feature, ship it on both. Or if you're not going to ship it on both, usually what happens is when you find a feature that exists on the web and not on mobile or vice versa, is because they did ship it and they just saw the engagement and one had poor engagement, so they're like, okay, we don't need it, so let's just pick it out. But I think it's just keeping consistency.
Yeah. So the question was like similar to like what do you read? Like thinking of learning designers still on the learning curve, and like anyone who wants to really be on the forefront. So what would you recommend to study, read, follow, and how do you kind of keep up with this world? And do you have anything at Tumblr that you guys are like collectively following or discussing?
For new designers or younger designers, I think one of the books that I could highly recommend it's called A Field Guide to Human-Centered Design, and it's a book created by Ideo, the design company, and I recommend that book because they really break down the design thinking process. So they help you understand how to empathize with the user, how to, brainstorm around it, think about rapidly brainstorm, come up with different ideas, and then from there go through a process of elimination really fast, and the prototype and the validate and all that. So I think it's really, it's an effective book, and I highly recommend that. As far as like Tumblr goes, we don't. Because we, again, like I said, we're not very rigid, so it's more about, I think the great thing about it is that the creative team, we all trust each other to be an expert in their own field. So if somebody does something like, the way I work is completely different from my peers, from my colleagues, but at the same time, we rely on each other and we know that we know what we're doing. So it's more like if we find something interesting, like an article, we'll share it, but I don't think we say you gotta do it this way or that way, because it's more like if you just understand that there is a process and you have your own process, that is fine. Just make sure that when you explain it to your peers or your colleagues that they can follow your thought process, because that's important. Communication is very important, because without communication, somebody could look at what you're doing and say, I don't know what you're doing, and then they might form an opinion saying, I think you're wrong, when you're not necessarily wrong. So it's more about communicating every little detail and being able to walk through, helping them guide them through your thought process.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was very great.
Ну что, вот такая вот вам таблетка дизайн из Америки. Напишите в комментариях, как вам понравилось. Вот, название книги в текстовом варианте. Не знаю,
Ну,
что...
там было видео, там, ну, типа, литературу, которую рекомендуют. Ну, мы посмотрим там, пришлем.
Ну да, сейчас, к сожалению, у нас в текстовом варианте и нет. Ну вот, напишите вообще, как вам понравилось. И еще раз вас с пятницы. Видите, мы тут уже сидим с вином. Вот. Себя скажу, что если вдруг вы хотите на большой курс от Аисы UX, который вы наверняка слышали, то под видео есть кнопочка «Перейти к специальному приложению», кликайте на нее, вводите там имя, email, телефон, оставляйте заявку, и мы вам позвоним и все про него расскажем. Вот. И в остальном еще у меня такая просьба. Мы на следующей неделе будем готовить много контента для вас, много чего записывать. Напишите в комментариях вообще, какая тема вам супер интересна. Например, не знаю, Photoshop с нуля, или, например, фишки в Photoshop, или, например, скетч, или, например, фигма, или принципал, или как получать деньги с клиентов, или как расти, или как получить леночку на Behance. Короче, вот какая-нибудь дизайн-тема, которая вас сильнее всего интересует, если вы напишите, то мы в списочек тем для себя все это запишем. Сергей, что из сказанного было новым для вас или удивило?
А я, по-моему, еще с первой серии вам говорил, что, короче, ну, маловероятно, что мы там найдем что-то безудержно новое. Просто самые правильные истины, исходя из всех этих выпусков, заключается как раз именно в том, что ничего нового и необычного там нет. И главное, чтобы вы понимали все эти современные процессы, правильно применяли их в собственной практике и много работали. И да будет вам, как говорится, счастье.
И да пребудет с вами сила.
Да, и пребудет с вами сила и развитие вашей карьеры. Поэтому очень классно, что на самом деле там нет ничего нового. Ну, в том плане, что мы, если и дальше будем копать, то всего-навсего будем видеть какие-то незначительные изменения, там, плюс-минус, но в принципе, в целом, я говорю, все у всех плюс-минус одинаковое.
Вот такие дела. Ну что, хорошей вам пятницы. Мы пойдем пить вино и планировать наш захват мира дизайна. У нас еще куча работы, чтобы делать для вас, наверное, лучший контент по дизайну, по крайней мере, мы стараемся. Вот. Ну что, большое вам спасибо, хорошей пятницы, вот, и хороших выходных.
Спасибо, да.
Пока-пока.
До новых встреч, пока-пока.